Welcome of Purposely. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Demi today. Hi, Demi. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. So I've had a bit of a hiatus from doing podcasts. I've done one this morning and then you this afternoon, but it's good to get back on the horse. I feel like everyone, I was having a bit of a meltdown and struggling to juggle everything. So I just thought I have to have a break from podcasting, but it's fun to talk to people and see what's going out there, going on. I can't even talk. What's going on in the world? And you are also in Melbourne, so you are currently in lockdown under house arrest.
Feeling it, feeling it for sure. I mean, podcasts, as much as like we love doing things like podcasting, it takes so much work. So, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you were able to take time out and alleviate a bit of pressure, because I think we all have to let something go in this time and take time to just process and deal with everything that's happening at the moment, because it's wild.
It's intense. So, the first question I normally ask my guests, just so that everyone can learn a little bit about you and what you do, is if you were at a barbecue or a dinner party, I mean, if you're allowed to do that, you're not really allowed to do that anymore because we're not allowed to have fun. But anyway, if you were allowed and someone said, "Oh, hello, Demi, nice to meet you. What do you do?" How do you explain what you do?
Yeah, great question. It's quite difficult at the moment. So I guess I would say that I connect like-minded millennials through conversation and community. I would say that is what I do.
Awesome. So we'll delve a little bit more into that in a minute. But first of all, you're obviously a millennial, and I'm obviously very interested in millennials, and I've done my own research. But I'd love to hear about your story and your background, the story behind the story, because I feel like people can really connect and learn through listening to other people's life experiences. So let's wind back the clock and learn about Demi and how you ended up where you are today. So go right back to the start, go as deep as you want, and share with us your very interesting story.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I guess I had a really great kind of schooling experience in terms of high school part. I was social butterfly, loved hanging out with friends. The study stuff didn't really interest me that much, but I was on a level enough where I could get by not doing much. So I never had any kind of pressure there. And I always had this idea that I wanted to do something in business, always had this vision of me strutting down an office in a suit, like, being this boss woman in an office. Like, that was my ideal dream. And so I went and studied commerce. And from there, I just realized, I've just gotten out of this school stuff. This new school stuff, university, didn't have the social aspect. So I was no longer enjoying the learning, because the only part I enjoyed about the learning before was the social part. And I felt this immense pressure. I remember I was studying commerce, and I had this immense pressure from my dad at the time to do finance. Like, finance was the way to go. That was the safe job to go for. And I had said I'll go to uni, but I'm going to do marketing instead, major in marketing. And that was already such a huge thing in my family. I'm from a Greek background, and it was such a huge thing that marketing wasn't it at the time. I mean, this is start of like socials and digital and stuff like that. And so I thought, if I'm going to get through this degree, I need something to get me through it, so I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, because I'm really just hating this. So I started working in socials and doing all of that stuff, and it was really great in the beginning. I remember I got paid like $100 a week to run someone's social media account. I would take the photo. It would be like 10-15 hours of work, and I was stoked to get $100 to get paid to take photos of food and to run a socials account. I thought that was like the coolest thing ever at the time. But then slowly the warranty, kind of the idea of the social stuff started to wear off, because again, I was working freelance. I was working remotely in 2013, and I just found it really isolating, and I wasn't able to connect with anyone, and I was learning in university, and it was none of the work that I was doing in the field. Like, I was running essentially like a successful socials business with like 6-7 clients. I was starting to turn people away, and none of the stuff I was learning at uni applied, and I didn't see any value from it because I didn't have any social connections or anything like that. And I was really, I just wasn't myself. I started not going to social events. I started, making excuses to hang out with friends because I thought I need to do more. I need to do more. I need to succeed. I need to prove that marketing is a real job as well, and all of those things. And then it wasn't until 2016 actually, and I don't think I've ever said this parts of the story, but I went on MKR, so the Australian cooking show, and
you were on that show.
Yeah, I was on that show in 2017, but we filmed it in 2016, and a friend had just texted me saying, do you want to audition? And I was like, yeah, why not? Like, let's do something for fun. And even going into it, I thought, and this is how pigeonholed I was at succeeding in my career, I was like, this will be a great opportunity to network with people in the marketing team and work in marketing at Channel 7. What a dream, And when we got eliminated from the show, we even bought chocolates for everyone, wrote personalized notes, because I thought we need to leave here with really great connections. And I did that. And the funny thing about that was it opened my eyes into a world of kind of creativity and media and all of the things that I used to always do without it being a thing. So like when I was younger, I'd always invite friends over and I'd force them to like jump in front of the camera and I'd do a shoot or, make stupid videos and not share them anywhere, just record them on my phone. And I was like, is this a thing? Like, could I do something like this? And so it wasn't the like TV experience that was exciting for me. It was the experience of seeing creatives in work and knowing that marketing and business weren't the only options for me, even though I thought that they were, because of the pressure that I felt from external factors and probably from myself. Like, it wasn't like every day someone was saying to me, you need to do this. It was just this pressure I had kind of put on myself. And from there, I started a food and fashion blog and started getting into the other side of things. And it was just really eye-opening for me what the digital world could be if I let it be, if I just kind of sat with it and decided to explore the creative side of things. And from there, I got really lost and I didn't know what I wanted to do because I started to get confused. I was like, oh, wow, you can really do whatever you want. You don't have to do one thing. And I started getting into podcasts, meeting different people that did different things, and was kind of really afraid to tell people that going from my whole high school life knowing what I wanted to do to having no clue what I wanted to do. And I realized that probably in that university time when I was feeling really isolated, that was that reason, was because I felt I was going down a path that I didn't want to live or wasn't authentic to me, and I couldn't see a way out. And then when I started slowly opening up to people and saying, look, I actually don't know what I want to do, and I'm really confused, I noticed that 90% of people I spoke to felt the exact same and were scared to say something. And I thought, I need to do something about this. I need to share more about this. And I'm a big mouth, so if I have the guts to be able to say something, let me do it in the hopes that other people will. So that evolved into the Millennial Crisis Podcast, and now researching millennials and in the workplace, and I guess the things that we're missing and why we're such a different generation.
Amazing. I love it. Well, congratulations and good on you for, doing what you're doing, because I think it's awesome. And I know that you also have a big focus on mental health because, we talk about it all the time. There is a mental health crisis, and given what's going on now, I think that that's just going to be compounded by our current circumstance. Particularly in Melbourne. So from your perspective as a millennial, how do you think millennials are coping with this pandemic and lockdown?
Yeah. Pandemic, like through the lockdown wise, I think in the beginning, and there was a huge Deloitte study that was done as well, and it said that millennials actually found that they were reduced in stress in the beginning of it because we no longer had the pressure to do it all. We almost had an excuse to not do things. And when I spoke to a lot of my friends or a lot of the people in my community, they all said the same thing in terms of they were worried in a different way. They were worried about their parents, and they were worried about their younger siblings because of their futures. But their work, a lot of them didn't actually lose a lot of work in the beginning. We may have had hours cut and things like that, but it wasn't that initial work worry. It was more worry of other people, and it was a bit of an alleviation of, oh, I don't have to do everything on the weekend. I don't have pressure to go do all these things. I can just breathe a little bit.
Yeah.
Now I think it's a lot more people are confused more than ever. And it's why I think that people have started to relate to the content I've put out a lot more, because they feel as though it's okay to not know what they're doing. And I think there've always been underlying issues for all of us. Like I say, the isolation part, I think a lot of millennials and Gen Z were isolating pre-coronavirus because there's a lot of underlying issues for us when it comes to mental health regardless. But now that's kind of bubbled up and people have had to sit with themselves. And now it's like, okay, well, it's okay to talk about this stuff. So it's almost given people permission to be able to talk about it. And so although it's terrible what is happening, I truly believe that this is going to be a great opportunity for a lot of us as millennials and as young people who don't have a lot of the dependables that your generation have or the generation above have, to be able to reevaluate what they want to do and figure out their escape plan from the current life they're living or career they're on, and start pursuing something that they really want. So I believe in a lot of the people that I've been speaking to that this is the way that we will be going, and there's a lot of amazing resources out there at the moment to help push that forward. But it's a struggle. It is a struggle.
Yeah. So it sounds like with anything, this crisis has had some positive impacts and some negative impacts from your perspective. A lot of people are saying that this is kind of humanity's wake-up call that we needed to have, because particularly in countries like Australia and Europe, we have had so much economic growth and times of prosperity, and millennials, Gen Z have never really experienced any kind of hardship. This is how the world sees it: hardship or life events that of this magnitude. And it's kind of like a coming of age thing. Like you kind of have to experience this shit to earn your stripes as an adult or something. I think that it's undeniable that this has brought things into perspective for so many people. It's like made you reevaluate what's important, what's not important. And I think that we as adults have the faculties to be able to do that. But what I'm concerned about is what impact this is going to have on the younger generations. Like I'm talking about the younger Gen Zs and the alpha generations, which my son is one of, because we know that the formative years are 0 to 7 and probably 7 to 14. That's when you form all your values, your beliefs, your behaviours, your strategies for coping. And at the moment, we're living in a world that is extremely stressful and it's so much fear, and it's like, what impact is this going to have on the way that younger people think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that if like I got really sucked into the negative of everything for a long time, and I remember there was one point of it where I said, I mean, my parents had the news on all the time at one point, and I remember saying, like, I can't, I don't want to listen, and I refuse to believe that this is the way things are going. And I started to look at, okay, well, if this is happening, what can I do, and how do we move forward from this? What are the options? What are the pivoting stuff? And I think when it comes to like the youth, like let's say your son's age and stuff like that, I think if we're going to try and put a bit more of a positive spin on it or have a different outlook on it, it's the fact that perhaps things like younger children starting going to therapy from younger, or talking about mental health from younger, is going to be conversations that parents are going to start having more. And if that's a thing that coronavirus has brought, then I believe that is going to be so much more impactful into our future. For the first time, I heard my parents mention things about mental health. And that's crazy for the older generation to be acknowledging things like that, because everyone is experiencing it, no matter how privileged their life has been. They're now experiencing some sort of mental strain in that sense from it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in saying that, I hope that anyone who is stuck in that can think, or anyone who does see people experiencing that can kind of start breaking the taboo and be like, well, yeah, this is what happens, and we need to actually figure out ways to educate people on how to deal with these things, instead of turning a blind eye or getting stuck in the doom and gloom. And I believe that if we can have those conversations and we can work internally, that all the external stuff will start figuring itself out and it'll start happening. And I've seen it time and time again. I now began running virtual events for millennials, and we talk about careers with purpose, mental health, and business. And in all of the sessions, the underlying thing is mental health, and realizing that every single person in the group deals with different things. And one of the biggest things for us, there was a study done at Deakin, and it was that millennials and Gen Z, it was done on millennials and Gen Z, and it said that we don't go to, there was a quote by a young boy that was 17 and said, I don't go to therapy because that's for people, I want to save it for the people who need it. And it's this idea that because we're privileged, that we're not allowed to seek help, or we're not allowed to worry about our problems. And it's the comparison of, like, you know, eat your dinner, don't you know there's starving kids in Africa? It's that kind of chat. So I hope that it's kind of, it opens the floodgates to start talking about it more in that sense. Yeah.
No, you've hit the nail on the head there. I think that a lot of the narrative around what's going on at the moment, from what I can see, is this whole Karen thing, which I find bizarre, that we now have a name for a white middle-class lady who is, has first world problems. I'm really interested that there's not a man version of Karen.
I was going to say, where's the Darren? Like, where's the Bill? Where's the asshole in the office? The sexist thing, you know?
It needs like some kind of name like that. But I just find it bizarre. But you're 100% right. It's like this whole ideal that that's going around at the moment, particularly when you look at other states and the way that they are talking to us. And social media is so toxic at the moment. Like, I'm trying not to go on Facebook because it's just shit. Like, everyone's just being really nasty to each other. Everyone's in fight or flight mode, and like everyone's just doing what they've got to do. But people are being like they're being really shit to each other. But there's this whole thing about like, if you are questioning this, what's going on, or if you're saying, well, this isn't fair, we don't think we should do this, you're now a selfish Karen and you're a bad person. Or if you're complaining about your circumstance, or you're complaining, like, you know, like I've still got a job and I'm still making money. So like, someone said something to me about the other day about, oh, like, what are you complaining about? At least you've got a job. So, well, it's this whole thing that that it's not okay to not be okay. And we talk about it all the time and we say all this shit, but when it boils down to it, we're still just being assholes to each other. So, like, what do you say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, for those listening that might not know, the millennial crisis, I created a definition around the word, and I define it as a privileged problem that consciously or subconsciously affects your mental health or well-being. And the biggest example I had for it was I was working 4 days a week. I had an incredible job, an amazing title, making a lot more money than what my friends and peers were, going away every week, had friends and stuff like that, but I was miserable. I was living a life that I didn't want to live, in a sense that, like, I felt like it wasn't what I was supposed to be doing, but I thought that, well, this is the way it is. I should be grateful. I should be grateful. I should be grateful. And I sometimes get the question, like, why would you be helping millennials, privileged millennials, when you could be helping people less fortunate? And the idea of that is us at this level, by figuring out our minor mental health issues, accepting them and working through them, we are just on the tip of the iceberg to be able to elevate to the next level. Like, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy kind of thing, if we solve our small problems, which to us are big problems, and we're not taking away from that at all, because you're really supposed to feel whatever issues you have. But once you give yourself permission to feel them, it actually doesn't take that long to get past it, versus the people who are not having a place to sleep and all of those other things. Often they're a lot happier because they haven't had a taste of the other stuff as well. So then once we are able to figure out what we want to do, we're able to help so many more people, and it becomes a ripple effect and a snowball. And that's at least what I found. As soon as I began opening up, I began to have so many more people open up to me, and now so many more people come back to me saying, you've actually given me the courage to, or I'm actually now able to do this, or I had this conversation with this person and now I feel so much better for it, just because I accepted that my first world problem was actually a problem and I dealt with it, and now I can move on. So in a lot of the work I do, it's always about, there's always, like, everyone's dealing with something, and it doesn't matter how big or small that something is, they're dealing with it. So we need to have more empathy and compassion for people in that sense.
So you've just touched on something else that I think a lot of people will resonate with, is this whole concept that millennials are really entitled. And you've probably heard this narrative before. It's one of the favourite narratives of the mainstream media. They love to talk about how selfish and entitled you are. So why do you think that people or the media like to portray you guys as being selfish and entitled? Basically, you're a bunch of Karens. What's with that?
I think when it comes to that stuff, unfortunately, it's the clickbait, right? Like, the other stuff that I've started to get a lot more into and speaking a lot more about is the idea of, like, digital mindfulness and consumption online. And it's this idea that when we see titles like that, a lot of the time it's likely us millennials who are feeding into it as well, thinking like, well, what are they saying about us now? Or it's the older generations thinking, yeah, screw the younger generations, let's have a little bitch about them or whatever. And I think that it's like, I don't think we should take it to heart. And I think that for us to know, like, one thing that for millennials that a lot of us deal with is our parents or our grandparents, they worked so hard and they had different struggles to what we did. And those struggles seem to be from the outside, like that survival kind of mode. But now we have these internal struggles more. And that's what's really causing the grief for us. So just because the struggles aren't external doesn't mean that they're not still really relevant and impactful on us. And so the biggest things we struggle with is like comparison and perception. which is like the two biggest things. And so to feed into another narrative when we already have all of this internal stuff coming like into us, I think is, it's not worth it. Like let's not create more problems for ourselves.
Absolutely, I would 100% agree with that. I feel like millennials are an easy target because you were kind of the first generation who were labelled as these digital natives. You live your lives online. You're very open about what you're doing in your lives, and your life is like an open book. And I feel like because of that, it's very easy to target you guys and label you and judge and say nasty things. What would you say?
Well, I would define us as the limbo generation in that. So when people define us as the digital natives and stuff like that, although we are a lot more digitally illiterate than, the generations before us because we grew up earlier, it's the digital world disrupted us in those learning phases, right? Like I was in end of high school when I was first introduced to social media, besides like chats in year 7 and things like that. And so they're like our development stages, right? So now we have this new toy to play with, and no one's given us a rule book on how to play with it and how to utilize it. And the people who are supposed to be teaching us don't even know how to use it themselves. And so I think it's a kind of an unfair judgment sometimes to say that we understand all this stuff when we really don't. And because that assumption happens all the time, it's an extra pressure to feel as though you should know. And the openness that we see online is all curated. There's no real transparency in the stuff that we do. It's always airbrushed and highlighted. And now even if you're going into like people with careers and online dating and all of those things, there's this constant pressure from, or even when the internet first happened, this constant pressure of watch what you post online, because if you post anything bad or real or, not flawless, then someone's going to see it and you don't know where that's going to go, from a generation that didn't understand it to begin with. So we got the advice from the authority generation, which is the generations before us, when they didn't even understand it as well. And the systems since 10, 15 years ago have not really considered a lot of education around how we can still function online, how we can be mindful online, how we can not let things affect us, how we can curate our feeds so that they work for us and not against us. All of these little things still aren't in schools, still aren't being talked about in the home, because the parents don't even know themselves. So it's something that it is quite concerning, and it's something that really should be taken seriously. Just because the other generations can't see physically what is happening, like the struggles that they experienced, doesn't mean that we're not experiencing our own struggle and kind of revolution thing of our own, our war zone. Our war zone is online now.
Exactly. That's a really great analogy. It definitely is a war zone, and it is at the moment. And I obviously use social media a lot in my business, but lately I've just decided to do a bit of a detox, where I stop looking at it and using it, because it's actually so addictive. And I often wonder and worry about what impact technology is having on my son's brain. I'm into neuroscience, and I've done a lot of research myself, and like all of the research says that when kids watch videos online or play games, it actually has the same chemical reaction in their brains as giving them cocaine or sugar. Like it's basically a reward dopamine response. And dopamine response is the same for drug addiction. So I do worry, are we creating a generation of young people who are being programmed for addiction? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point, and it is really concerning. And when I have like the sessions that I have with people, the events that I do, the idea of those events is always to open up a conversation that we don't have, and then to make the people in the group advocates. So once you know about it, you want to constantly work towards it in a tiny way, right? It's like us swapping from plastic straws to metal straws. It's a tiny change that we can make from the environment that's really easy for us. And I think like as parents, when you go to mothers groups or when you gather at the schoolyard when we could, and on all of those things, or when you're having those parent teacher interviews, or looking for schools asking like, well, what are you doing about screen time? What is the education around the digital landscape? Do we have anything like that? And it's something that I'm becoming more and more passionate about as I grow up, and the same as in workplaces. You know, we have social media managers who have to be online all the time, 24/7. That's the expectation there. And then they have their own social media accounts outside of that as well. So they're spending 24/7 on there, and they're also getting paid no money. So, you know, you think of a window cleaner that's like having to squeegee the windows and gets paid a lot more because they're risking, you know, the height different, again, the external stuff. Whereas for social media managers these days, we don't like the internal struggles that they're going to be facing from being online all the time, and the damage that can be having there. There's no reflection of that risk in their monetary value as well, because the perception is, oh, you're just commenting online, you're just posting online, you're just doing all of those things. And the mental health factor or the neuro factors aren't factored into that. And it's, again, it's the idea of the external versus the internal, and it's not okay.
No, it's crazy, and it's a crazy time at the moment for anyone who is single or working from home. Like it's so isolating. How are you going with isolation? Like, do you live by yourself? Have you got a bubble? Like, how are you dealing with it personally?
Yeah, well, I quit my job at the end of last year to become a digital nomad, travel and work around South America. So when COVID hit, I was 6 months in my trip, and I got phone calls from all my family being like, you have to come back home. So now I was in Argentina, in the north of Argentina, in like this tiny town where I knew no one, and I thought I was going to bunker down for a couple of weeks and then I'd be back on my merry way. And I wasn't. That was in mid-March. So I came back mid-March, and it was a 43-hour flight home from Argentina to Costa Rica to LA to New Zealand, then to Australia. And it was the time where mid-flight New Zealand was closing its borders. So I didn't even know if I was going to be able to get home at that point. Like it was a crazy kind of 48 hours. I had my sister calling the embassy and trying to get me across and all of that. But so I ended up back isolating in my mum's house in her bedroom because it had an ensuite, with my family bringing food to my door for 2 weeks.
Quarantines. So
I just missed that because this was when Scott Morrison said all citizens come back. So I pretty much came back. I bought a ticket that day. And so the hotel quarantine started, I think, a week later after that for people who hadn't kind of gotten in that time. So I quarantined in the bedroom, had trays of food brought to my door and stuff like that. And I've been at home ever since. So to come home, I was supposed to be on this kind of new career trajectory and figuring out what I wanted to do and what my plans were. To come home at 26, living back at my mum's house with no job and no idea what I wanted to do with my future, that was a scary thing to happen. And I just remember like thinking and saying to my friends, like, what the hell is my life right now? Like, I would have never have thought at 26 I'd be here. And so it was tough. at the start, and then I kind of from there just flipped things around and really thought, okay, like, just because I'm not abroad doesn't mean that I can't still do the stuff that I was planning to do over there. It's just going to take a different shape than I thought it was. And yeah, I actually I was on a program and I wrote a letter to myself in December of last year, and it made its way from Colombia to Amsterdam and then to me, I think 3 weeks ago. And I read it, and all of the stuff that I wanted to do besides the travel stuff, I still have continued to do now, which was just really nice to read. The fact that despite everything being disrupted, I found a way to still do the things that I said, I hope you're doing these things. So that was a really nice kind of moment. But in saying that, the months before that were shocking.
Oh, I can imagine. Well, congratulations on what you're doing. I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing. You're showing typical millennial tenacity and bravery, which I think are two of the values that you guys really embody. So, if people want to learn more about you and what you do, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best place to probably find me is the website, so www.themillennialcrisis.com, and that's where you can find out more about the virtual events that we're running. Otherwise, LinkedIn, Demi Kotsoris, and the same on Instagram, or the Millennial Crisis again. It's all, I think, from the website you can find everything.
Amazing. And we'll also share your podcast with everyone in the links when we publish this to Buzzsprout. So if you want to listen to Demi and her podcast. But thank you so much for being on the show. It was amazing to hear your story, and good luck in the last few weeks of hopefully lockdown for us Melbourneians, and hopefully we can be released from our cages soon.
Thank you so much. It was great to chat with you and have a bit of light in the day, right?
What's the first thing you're going to do when we get out of lockdown?
I am seriously considering buying a van. Like, that is my next thing, to travel around Australia and live the van life and work remotely out of that. That's my next thing. Even if it's just around Victoria for the beginning, that's my my dream for 2021.
Good luck. I can't wait to see some pictures of you in your van, in your shag and wagon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
No worries. It was awesome to talk to you, and I'll share Demi's handles in